BONK. 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 Subscribe. Subscribe. Today's video started off as part of yesterday's Kimi K2 coding test. However, I began to have so much fun with the agentic coding in making a game that we now... BONK. BONK. So for today's video, we are going to be using Kimi K2 with RooCode to agentic code ourselves a fun little game, which we do see BONK right here. So because I do want to test this in some form of agentic coding scenario, I want to show that I have it in RooCode right here. It is set up with the Moonshot AI API with a key here, and we can see that the currently selected model is this brand new 0905 preview. So everything here is all set, and we can basically go ahead and now give it a prompt. So for this, I don't want to just do like some web language like HTML or CSS or JavaScript. So I'm going to be asking it for a Python first-person shooter with a few different features that I've kind of mapped into a prompt that is probably a little more curated for an agentic coding scenario. I'm going to put it in the orchestrator mode because then it can probably just kind of figure out what it needs to do. And unfortunately, I don't know how much I can really expand this. So we'll just go ahead right here and we can see that our context length is quite decent here. Ooh, it's giving the enemies some AI behavior, so that'll be interesting. Inevitably, that'll probably just be like the ability to do some form of pathfinding or like something AI, but you know, it does count. Uh-oh. So we did get a failure right here while it was working on the enemy script, but it did go ahead and kind of just retry here, and now it is continuing to make the enemy script, so it was able to self-correct course and then go ahead and continue writing the file. Okay, so some of the AI behavior here for the enemies is just kind of state. So we have patrol, chase, attack, and dead, which is kind of, those are what we would expect to have in some simple first-person shooter enemies. All right, so let's see if it does correctly adhere to my prompt, which told it to have two different types of weapons that the player can use. If this works, this might be a pretty intricate and like decently fun to play game. So it's made up the author and it just calls it Game Studio. So that's, you can find this under Steam. If you search for Game Studio, that's where it'll be posted. It seems like it got hung up on trying to create this final file. So I did just manually cancel it and it then just went ahead and automatically is retrying. And it is definitely making more progress here, as before it had just kind of like hung right here and wasn't really doing anything. So. Oh, and it put 4 different weapon types in there when I had only asked for 2. So assuming everything works, obviously this will have gone above and beyond on that specific request, which is always nice to see. And I find it funny, the requirements is just, there's 1. So normally I don't know that you need like a dedicated file for that, but I suppose it is always good practice and nice to see it is thinking very production minded when doing all this. It should now return to the orchestrator, I would imagine. Oh no, it's doing the requirements.txt, which there's 1. So now I would assume it will throw this back to the orchestrator. Oh no, okay, so it's putting placeholder files in the assets directory, supported format. Damn, okay, so this is basically going real hard, saying you can put like a .obj or .fbx file in here to actually have these models for this game. That's actually kind of cool. So it's doing textures now. This would actually, assuming that the core gameplay logic does actually function, I'm not fully opposed to actually going ahead and just try to put some like FBX file that I have here from like Unity random game or things like that. So this is very interesting. And it is really being very thorough in here with the actual things that it is assuming we will place into this directory. I will say basically what I'm noticing here is this is seemingly doing this in a very production focused mindset. So it's going all in to basically give you something that would end up in a kind of polished and finished and ready to ship result, which is nice to see. It's doing a lot of deep thinking, I would say. So now it's trying to run the test script that it created to test the game to make sure everything is working functionally, which is actually nice to see. So, all right, we got an unexpected error here with one of our weapon shooting commands. So it's just now seeing. I like that it did that. It's just, it makes it so much easier as opposed to me having to test this initially and then ending up getting that same error and then having to paste it in here. So it kind of has to fix it then. I do very much like that it made this test script and actually wanted to run it prior to saying, okay, the game is complete, because it will have basically saved time for us where it can identify issues and then fix them here prior to the actual deployment. All right, so after a few different tries, it did correctly pass all of the test functions that it had coded here, and it is now throwing it back and updating the to-do list. I am really impressed with that, and it did really make things a lot easier as opposed to myself having to test and then copy paste the error and test and things like that. So I'm very now interested to see how this goes, and truly, because I very much enjoy game development and I have a lot of experience with Unity, it just really seems like this was a very customizable starting point where we can implement now our own custom models, custom maps, and custom sounds, which if you know me, you know I could probably have a little bit of fun with that. So according to our instructions from RooCode, we can just run python main.py, and we should hopefully be able to get a functional game here. Uh-oh. So now it wants to actually test the game script instead of the test script, which is going to be cool. Okay, so it did open for a second, which is good because that means it was able to remedy the previous issue, and it is just having a camera reference issue now. Okay, so obviously one of the downsides that we're noticing here is we are getting a lot of errors. However, on the flip side of that, it is actually going ahead, and so far it has fixed every single error that it's gotten in the first try, which is nice to see. And I'm just judging that based off of the fact that we've not received the same error here after it fixes whatever it had previously noticed as an error. So now sometimes I would get like kind of impatient here, but very good. So what I was going to say prior to even seeing if this worked or not, I love that skybox. Interesting. Oh, okay. It had a timeout of 10 seconds. So what I was going to say prior to even seeing if that worked is I'm more inclined to get impatient if something is consistently failing to fix a specific issue. However, this was just fixing all of the issues successfully. It was just finding more, but it seems like it may now have actually gone ahead and so what would you like to do now? The timeout occurred because the game was running properly. Yes, that is correct. Okay, let me run it without timeout to confirm it's working. Okay, well, this is a 5-second timeout it's going to run it with now, so we'll close in 5 seconds, and I don't actually know how the, interesting. So I pressed the space bar, which inevitably would have performed some player action there because it said that the player has no velocity attribute, so that would have moved the player in some form or another. So I'm actually glad I did that, and that is probably something I would like to do, is just have it test this game in here and set the timeout to like 10 or 15 seconds and just try some of the different movement and shooting functionality. Being that that is actually put in the README right here, we will be actually capable of doing that real quick. So what would the space bar have done? So that was going to be jump. Okay, so it didn't, so the player would have hypothetically jumped. Left click is shoot and right click is aim, okay? So we can see that it's updating the to-do list right here, and basically it is just adding in the things it needs to do, which are basically to fix the missing or broken controls that I had noticed, and we'll just give it some time to go ahead and go through this, and we'll see if it does successfully fix these things. I'm happy to now report that we did actually get a successful test from this, as we can see basically from the terminal right here where it goes ahead and just tries to test a bunch of different aspects of the gameplay. So basically now the thing to do is just go ahead and actually test the skeleton game right here, and then we can actually get into the fun part, which is customizing this, because it put in so many different ways to actually put in our own maps, our own sounds, our own models, which could end up being somewhat enjoyable. So first and foremost, let's just go ahead and actually try to run this just to see if we get any blatant errors or anything like that. So we can see, obviously, now something you'll notice is that the actual text does appear, but unfortunately it doesn't show because it's white on white. So we can see that the weapons are actually changing, and if you do actually shoot, it does have some level of like up and down. So we do have some opponents right here, and it seems like maybe, okay, so the health works. I wonder if some of, oh, okay. And then unfortunately that did not work. So still there are a few things I've noticed here that need to be fixed. And I'll just throw it back over to the orchestrator here for it to kind of parse my feedback and then go ahead and ultimately fix this. Now, again, I've probably echoed this sentiment throughout the video, but something I'm really happy to see here is that while it has been generating quite a few errors, it has gone ahead and to date successfully fixed every single error that it has generated, which is just nice to see because that's what you ideally would want in a agentic coding scenario like this. So I found this awesome free cartoon city, which was in an FBX format and has a royalty-free license. So I've actually used this website a lot for other various like Unity asset purchases and things like that. So basically what I've done is just downloaded these and placed them within the assets directory for this game. And I am now going to just paste the actual result of just typing ls in the terminal, which would just list out the file structure in the hopes that this will now go ahead and basically modify the code to use the specific names of the assets. Beyond that, I am confused about how to place the textures because there are so many different texture images. So I am going to ask it for some assistance in regards with that as well. So now our FBX integration script is going to be tested. I don't know that, yeah. Okay, so we did get an error, but fortunately this seems to be quite apt at just identifying the problems and then fixing this. All right, let's try it one more time. Interesting. So something did load, which it appears we're having at minimum a texture issue. Now, obviously this is not the full-fledged game that it is loading. This is just a demo script to kind of see if the FBX is properly importing or loading. So definitely something has occurred here. I would assume, I thought this put a timeout in. Okay, so it didn't. Based on the previous failure, it just went ahead and made a markdown. Like, it basically just made a guide to fix everything here, but it didn't really actually implement these fixes itself. So I'm not 100% certain what we're expecting to see right here. Holy crap. It did actually, all right, so some of the textures aren't loading, but I must have been spoofed here because it did go ahead and do something where something actually kind of worked. I can see significant progress from the output. Sorry, I just got kind of excited after seeing that. That was really cool. So I think there were some issues with the textures, obviously, and let's see what it notices right here. So it's basically saying there are some issues with the texture still. However, I want to just go ahead and actually spend some time playing this real quick because that was really quite cool. As I forget the command to actually run this. So, I mean, look at this. So I don't know where the enemies will spawn as it. Okay, so there's one right there. And still, it seems like the enemy, well, it was telling me that I just can't aim. So I can switch my weapon. I still think there's something wrong with the enemies, but for a second, let's just actually appreciate the fact that obviously this is a nice, pretty city that was like received for free. Okay, so this little tiny map right here, and I just got clobbered. So there are some, I'm just going to close it and then reopen it. Obviously, this is not 100% fixed. I mean, you'd want like mesh colliders or box colliders around some of these objects and things like this, but I still, these enemies are impossible to it's just, this reflects something that I find so cool about AI. And obviously in a lot of my testing, I don't necessarily go this hard because I like doing the light touch testing, and truthfully, like spending time actually building real things like this is pretty much what occupies all of my time aside from just filming YouTube videos, which is almost like a cathartic fun thing for me. But I will say this, for the price we paid here, for probably around $4 to $5, and then obviously we got a free FBX file and things, and this isn't working perfectly right now. Obviously there are some issues with the enemies seemingly being invincible or something of the sort, but the player obviously is not. It got the FBX loaded in. The scale is actually correct. I didn't have to do anything to the scale here, so it handled that and did a proper job with it. this just highlights, sorry, I may have gone on a tangent. It highlights how AI can give someone who may not otherwise have a lot of pertinent knowledge or experience in actually implementing things like this. It gives you a huge leg up. I mean, we worked hand in hand with this model. The model showed proper functionality in terms of being able to identify and remedy issues that it had in the code. Obviously, these enemies are following me, and while it did say that the issue was simply that the raycasts were hitting like child elements of the enemies, which is supposed to be the case, I just need to aim better. There is obviously seemingly some level of issue here, but they do they do manage to clobber us. There are some texture issues and things like that, but truthfully, the implementation process here that we went through with the actual FBX scaling and some of the texture application was really quite impressive. So I may actually just give it some feedback now on what we saw, and then I would like to add in some sounds and things like that. I've gone ahead and taken the liberty of creating my own assets to kind of sum this game up. So of course we are using Bob the sentient washing machine as the enemy. I did just combine all of his parts and export him as an FBX. In addition to that, I did record 2 sound effects just to be used for when the weapons are being fired. I have once again given the model the kind of file locations and names of these files so that it can go ahead and kind of figure out how to implement them into the game. And then we'll see how it goes. We're going to see if our enemies... Oh my goodness. Okay, so it definitely did not scale that properly. Do the sounds work? Ah. Oh, that it timed out. I apologize. Is this thing even on? Yeah, it's on. Bob working? Yeah, it's like 8,000 times too big.
Bonk. 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 Subscribe. Subscribe. Subscribe.
I've injured my neck in an unrelated thing, and it hurts here to laugh. But okay, so the sound effects work. The problem is the enemy seemingly is scaled probably like 100 times too big. I'm thinking I may just go ahead and kind of manually fix that scale. No, I should stay in the spirit of agentic coding and just have this fix it, but it takes so long. Good. Okay, so Bob is still way too big, and he is upside down, but it is using Bob as the enemy. Oh, it's...
Bonk. 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 Bonk.
Again, I did... something's gone amiss. I did put my own sound
Subscribe.
effects. You can... That's the internal structure of Bob. I'm having far too much fun with this, to be honest with you. Okay, so that is still far, far too large, so... Perfect. So the Bobs are there. We did get the sentient washing machine. Okay, so something seems to happen where...
Bonk. 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 Bonk.
It, okay, so here's our issue. Use Bob FBX with larger scale. No, we don't want this. So to sum this up, and truthfully, I probably spent a lot longer on this than I should have, but I did end up enjoying myself a lot here. We used a total of, well, let's just forget about that. The total cost here was around $7.75 for the entirety of everything we have seen here in the video. So really not horrible when you consider the massive amount of troubleshooting that needed to occur here. Beyond that, I will say takeaways from this are that speed is definitely a negative of using this model because it really does take a while to actually go ahead and just generate results. The token speed is fairly subpar. On the flip side of that, the cost to actually use this is relatively cheap, at least comparatively to some state-of-the-art models if you wanted to make that comparison. And I will say, while it did have a lot of errors out of the gate that needed to get fixed, the big takeaway from this that I am very pleased with is that it managed to fix every single error on its own. So even though the final game here is kind of not a fully polished AAA result, it is something that is a good stopping point, and it went from somewhere that was having multiple issues even when trying to open the original skeletal game script to something now that does kind of work in a decent fashion. I was very impressed based on how this went ahead and really extrapolated out my original game idea prompt, and to the point where that's why this video was actually just going to be part of the original Kimi K2 testing video that I did like 24 hours ago. But once I saw that it was actually putting in placeholders for assets and textures and FBX files and things like that, I realized like, okay, this could actually be pretty fun to build out as a fun little vibe coded project test. So I wanted to just kind of do that, and basically we end with the culmination of the game we have right here, which I'm sure you don't want to hear bonk anymore, but
bonk.
So that is basically why, I mean, it was just a lot of fun to actually
subscribe.
It did a nice job, and it was just very fun to use. Obviously, I would have preferred like half of those issues to just not be there from the get-go, but fortunately it was able to remedy its issues. So although issues are not nice to have, the model's ability to remedy them can really make them less of an issue, I suppose we could say. Now, this is just, it did a great job implementing the FBXs. Some of the textures here are, of course, still a little funky, but it is nice that I can seemingly elude all of these dangerous bobs.
Bonk. Subscribe.
Because we do have running effects and things like that. And truthfully, I could spend probably too long playing with this, which I already most likely have. So that is probably going to conclude this video. The takeaway here is probably you can just kind of judge the result and the process that led to it to see if you think this is good or not. I very much enjoyed playing with it, and I was very pleased with the level of depth that it actually planned the game out with, and then its troubleshooting capability was quite all right. So with that, if anyone is interested in this game, you can purchase it for $7.78 by just doing this yourself in RooCode with Kimi K2. But beyond that, yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to subscribe and then leave them. And that is going to wrap up this obscure agentic coding test with Kimi K2. So thanks for watching.